how many of you have an Alexa in your home or a Google Home or one of those things? Okay, so a lot of you. So many of you are conversing with the machine in one way or another, and that's going to become more common. We know we have lots of AI chatbots and other little bits and pieces that we're interacting with on a regular basis now. So we wanted to kind of pause and think about where that's headed and what that might mean from a user experience perspective, and for those of us in the room who are creating media experiences, what that means. So we have an excellent panel to do that of folks that are really from a range of backgrounds, but all of them doing stuff with new tech. I'm going to let them go down the line and explain who they are and what they do. We're going to go, I think, this way, and then we're going to skip Terry. We'll go with you last, Terry, so that we can pull up your slide. So he'll be last in order, Erica. But we'll start with Aleissia. So if you'll maybe start us off, tell us who you are, what you do.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Aleissia Laidacker. I'm Director of Developer Experience at Magic Leap. What I do at Magic Leap is my group is really responsible for working with a lot of our partners to see what types of products, SDKs, tools, what is it that we need to bring to developers to be able to create mixed reality experiences. So really being able to bring the digital element to the real world around us. Before Magic Leap, I worked in the video game industry for about 15 years, where I worked at Ubisoft Montreal. I was lead AI at Ubisoft, so for many, many years, my background was all about how do we go from, say, 15, 20 years ago in video games, we had these static digital characters that literally did nothing in video games, to now at this point trying to have it where we do have these virtual beings that are realistic, that are intelligent, and that can interact with us, the users. So a lot of my background from video games is very applicable to what I do at Magic Leap, but instead of having it screen-based, it's how do we use all of that to bring digital characters to the real world around us.
Cool. Mitu.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Mitu Khandaker, so I'm also a game designer, I'm also an entrepreneur and a teacher. So I'm an assistant professor at NYU Game Center, where I teach on game design generally, but I also teach specific classes on social simulation and AI and XR. I finished my doctorate about 4 years ago now on designing for sort of increasingly immersive interfaces, and the way that kind of changes what we're doing, and indeed the way that it changes the way we think about characters in those environments. So I'm an engineer and developer by background. I was previously a co-founder at a company called Spirit AI, where we built tools to help you author autonomous characters. Also, we built tools to help intervene in online harassment in games and beyond. I left that more recently, and I've started a new company called Glow Up Games, where again we're focusing on sort of telling these rich, compelling stories on mobile, but also on emerging platforms. We're currently working on a mobile game for a popular TV IP, which I can't talk about just yet. But again, we're very much keeping that focus on sort of developing relationships with characters, and what does that mean, and what does that look like. And the other focus, I should say, of Glow Up Games as well is that we're specifically, we are 3 women of color co-founders. We're very much targeting underrepresented majorities. I think our value statement as a company is that we're trying to be the Fenty Beauty of interactive entertainment. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, now we're going to come to Oren. If you haven't heard of his company yet, it's because he's never talked about it publicly. So he's quite literally kind of launching his company publicly here today.
On stage,
so
exactly.
Please tell us about what you're doing.
So thank you for inviting me. So my name is Oren. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Our1. And Our1 is basically computer-generated video production company, which means that we are creating synthetic videos in photoreal and voice real quality. And we are doing that, basically what we do in simple words, we are replacing the camera with computers that can generate video without the use of cameras at all. So the way we do that is basically by enabling our customers, who are currently businesses, mostly from media, news, and gaming industries, to come to our platform, create, choose, and use synthetic characters of real-life people or fictional people, both. And after choosing them or creating them on the platform, in photoreal and voice real quality, they can generate in a very simple process videos that will go to all of the industries that we are familiar with today. Many applications, many use cases, a lot of interesting things are happening. I want to mention that we are building this platform for scale, not just for unique characters as Lil Miquela, which means that we will see a lot of Lil Miquelas in the near future by companies that will come and basically use our platform. And we usually say, so get comfortable because we are going to make another 8 billion characters all around us. So we need more space for that. It will be crowded.
Great. And Terry, you're going to help them learn to talk. So tell us what Modulate.ai does. And I think we have a slide for Terry as well.
Yep. So I'm Terry Chen, and you wouldn't believe the number of microphones I've had strapped to me this week. We're doing real-time voice conversion at Modulate.ai, and I'd love to show you a little bit about what we do. So this is an image of our online demo where you can actually, in real time, record your voice and play back your voice in kind of a mix of our different voices. And so we offer a lot of male to female, female to male conversion, but basically you can choose whatever vocal cords you'd like to sound like. And so I've got a few examples for you. Try it. Yeah.
Modulate voice skins let you customize how you sound.
Modulate voice skins let you customize how you sound.
Yep. Next one.
Relax, Donald, relax.
Relax, Donald, relax.
Yeah, so Gary was talking about real-time fact-checking. Relax, Donald. It'll happen.
There's a gorilla wearing a tie here.
There's a gorilla wearing a tie here.
So we're really excited to bring real-time voice conversion to the world.
Excellent. Okay, so by the way, some of you are like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's get into this. You said we're going to see 8 billion Lil Miquelas coming along. That was a big number. That scared you, Aleissia, a little bit. But we know chatbots. I mean, how many of you used one today? I mean, they are in our lives. But this type of character is it's something quite different. What we mean by an AI-generated character. I think we all have a sort of conception of what that might mean. What do you think is the near-term prospect for the proliferation of these AI characters? Gary said it, on the last panel, could be 2050, could be sooner, not sure exactly. What do you think? Aleissia, I'll start with you and just come down the line.
You mean near term, like
Yes.
as in what do I see things,
Yes.
where's the focus?
What's the forecast?
So you mentioned chatbots, and I think that's interesting. I actually had someone I work with reach out to me this morning saying that they were talking to a customer support chatbot, and at the end, naturally we're like, thank you so much, this was awesome. Where 5-6 years ago, we were very frustrated talking to these chatbots because we always got responses of, I don't understand your question, please repeat. And now when I'm talking to, especially like customer support chatbots, I often forget that it's an AI and it does feel very realistic, like I am talking to a human. So I think in the near term, it really is focusing on trying to get these AIs, at least from a speaking and speech perspective, to the more humanistic side. Really focusing on the emotions of the characters. And I think that's where we need to also start bringing in experts who aren't necessarily just engineers to start working on these AI problems, to come in and try and see, how do we not fall down this rabbit hole of like fucking up a bit too much, like where we're going to go with AI, but really coming in and bringing in the humanistic and emotional side of what these characters could represent and how they interact with us.
Mitu, what do you think? What's the time frame?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few different things that are going to happen in the short term. So my focus, as you might have guessed, coming from sort of a games background and running a game studio, like I'm very much interested in the sort of playful applications of characters, of these kind of richer interactions with characters. I think that, one of the things I always like to think about and talk about is how when we're interacting with characters who we know are sort of AI driven in some way or are simulated in some way, like we know, like that is a part of our interaction with them, right? We sort of hold them in this kind of almost playful, like double consciousness way. Like we know that what we're interacting with is not real, so it's almost always kind of a playful interaction, which, and I think that that is great. And I think that this is why actually a lot of my interest is in looking at these, sort of doing further work in these characters in a video game context. Outside of that, I'm actually not sure, because I actually, this is something I've actually changed my stance on in the last few years. So my background previously was at this company called Spirit AI, where I was both looking at tools for developing autonomous characters, like out in the real world, but then also looking at online harassment. Then what happens though when you bring those two things together? I know this is something we're going to talk about, but we've all heard about things like the abuse towards digital assistants, etc. I actually increasingly think we're going to get into a weird space in the near term, and I've already seen a lot of projects like this where we're starting to represent digital assistants with a visual skin and a human skin, and obviously there's work that these folks are doing in that. But I actually think it's a bad idea. I don't think we should be representing. Digital assistants as human.
Okay, and that's one of the questions we're going to get onto, the difference between human and photorealistic versus characters, or even things like Lil Michaela, which are slightly not human, right? So, Terry, what do you think, near term?
It seems near term that the proliferation is quite inevitable and imminent. As Michael Crichton says, science can tell us or show us how to create pesticides, but it can't tell us not to use them. So really we have to strike a careful balance, like Mitu's saying, and just try to protect not only assistants, but also the people using them from all of the online harassment that's out there.
So before we go in the totally kind of concerned direction, what are the good uses you imagine, Oren, for your service?
So just answering the previous question first, I think that we are already doing that, and we believe that our platform will generate thousands of characters in the next couple of years. So it's already happening, but the vision is that probably in 5 years. 10% of the content generated will be generated with cameras, with computers and not cameras. And maybe in 15 years, I don't know, maybe 80% of the content will be computer-generated videos. But there are so many good applications. I mean, the main problem that we are trying to solve, and to solve it to everyone, is basically help everyone express themselves. And video is growing tremendously. Video is a great way to communicate with others. Everybody wants to do that. Everybody wants to create videos to explain what their company is doing, themselves, their brand. It could be the big companies, the small companies. But the main problem with production today is that the assets are not evenly distributed, which means small companies and medium companies cannot create high-quality videos today. They can do something, but it's not very good videos for them. Therefore, not enabling them to express their ideas. And we want to solve that. We want to enable them to come and create video which is cost-effective, not complex, in a simple process. And by doing that, we'll do a lot of good to all of the ones that wants to express their ideas. It could be media, it could be companies, it could be even, I will give you 2 examples, analysts that want to talk to their customers, and they don't have the capabilities to stand in front of a camera. So it's a long and tedious problem that everybody are trying to solve. They cost a lot, their hour rate is very high. And now, when we capture them on the platform, they can come and create more content. So
let's just spend a minute on the tech, what you're excited about. What technologies you're using in your companies and what ones you're watching very closely. Aleissia?
We could start from this side.
Yeah. I can then, or if you'd like, tell us what you're using.
So,
a little deep learning in there, a little AI.
So with my background in my PhD studies along deep simulations, and in the last 5 years when I was part of the Samsung Corporate Strategy Office, this is the office who basically builds, it's a machine that builds business units inside Samsung. So I was part of the IoT, the health, the automotive business units creations, and I can say I was very lucky because I was like the first one to recognize and push AI into our office. And it was all around voice and video. And being also an investor in Samsung, invested in the first 2 companies in the AI domain. So it was voice and video. So we are seeing a lot of technologies coming out from the universities, generative adversarial networks for video and encoders and other technologies that you'll speak about around voice. And we are at the stage where it looks real. It looks real enough to be a product, and we've recognized that and started using this on our platform.
Yeah. So at Modulate, what we're doing is we're blending some cutting-edge machine learning algorithms with some classical signal processing. And specifically, we're using, as many of you are sure familiar, GANs, which are generative adversarial networks. So basically, there's the generator, which we sometimes call the artist, that puts out some audio, and there's the discriminator, which is basically like the art critic. And it tells the artist, hey, your goods aren't good enough, or this is pretty good. And then as a result, we have some resulting audio that comes out in the target speaker's voice. So GANs have been used with great success in the image space. For example, NVIDIA has a technology called GAUGAN where you can basically paint with words, and like let's say you want a rock or some water, you just paint across a little canvas and then it'll generate a totally new image. And we're kind of applying the same type of technology where we're utilizing voice as an input instead. And it has tremendous applications. We're first going into the gaming space where we can really protect people, their identities, protect them from harassment by changing their voice to another human. And we're really excited about that.
Yeah, so I'm, definitely sort of continuing looking at sort of, natural language and, NLU. I suppose in general, the way that, I guess because of the sort of application in video games and looking at sort of the way that players understand their interaction with a character, there's this sort of problem of over-engineering things sometimes, right? Often in sort of when you're looking at video game AI, you're trying to do what is required in order for the player to just have this kind of really rich experience. And you can throw all kinds of systems at them, but if the end result is that they can't tell the difference between this one solution and that solution, then what one is really worth pursuing. But anyway, so yeah. We're sort of definitely looking at all kinds of ways to continue sort of looking at, one of the things I'm really interested in is, developing relationships with characters over time, right? And it really is kind of bringing in like all of the data for, the things you've said to characters before, the way that you've emoted with them before, and all of these things, and actually using that to sort of build up a picture of, okay, what is the sort of emotional state of this relationship you have with the character? So that's kind of one of the things I'm continuing to focus on. In addition to that, I suppose I'm just really interested from my general background and my doctoral work on sort of multimodal input, right? So, what other factors can you bring in which a character can understand? Like, things like gaze, things like like how you're moving your body, etc. So I think there's a lot of interesting work happening, in those areas. So.
Yeah, so similar to what you're saying about the relationship with characters, I think the reason why some of us are so frustrated with the current digital assistants that we see with Alexa and with Google is because they've been programmed to just accept commands. They do not have agency, they don't actually have goals. They really are there to serve like us, and they are slaves essentially. Yes. This is actually something that from the video game side we've been trying to solve for years and years and years. And I think that there's two things kind of blocking us from being able to make that switch to where AIs actually do have agency and that they're there to work with us. One is that the characters need data. As a human, my agency of what I want to do is really focused about like the people that I'm seeing around me, the conversations that I'm having. If I'm walking on the street and I pass by a shop and I realize like, oh wow, I've actually been looking for, brand new running shoes, like because I see that is data that is influencing my agency of what I want to do. And right now, digital characters don't have that information. And it's being worked on, but it really needs to be that we need to build up that data set And then on the flip side, it's how do we start processing all of that data? Traditional AI, especially from video games, have been for years and years designed around if this, then do that. So from the AI side, we call it like more behavior tree AI development, and that's very limited. We need to get to an aspect where we start working with around like AI planners, AI models, but to be able to do this, it's a lot of processing power, and this is where we need to keep progressing in terms of deep learning algorithms. How do we process this data so that characters can have agency based off of the data around them?
So we might need some basic computational breakthroughs in order to get to this world that you imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so by the way, we always run short on time on all the best conversations, which I love this topic. But I do want to hit two quick things, and I'm going to ask these questions kind of. Well, actually, let's just go with this one. We got into this human versus photorealistic. We're imagining this proliferation. Many people in the room thinking about pitfalls. What are the differences in the human versus in human photorealistic versus interactions with animations? Why would one be more preferable? How might we interact with other things like buildings? What do you imagine when you think of this? Are all the characters on Hour One, are they going to be people, or are they going to be rabbits? What are they going to be?
So yes, we are getting a lot of questions about can you do unique animals talking. I don't know, many people want their cat to speak, so we got these kind of offers many times. Can you make me a cat talking to my child on her birthday? So we got that a lot. So I think we will enable that, but at the beginning our target market is businesses and not consumers. I think there is a huge gap, a huge leap that we need to do before we open it to consumers because of all the options that they will probably create with such a problem.
This guy's leaving $1 billion idea, pet deepfakes, on the table. So if somebody out there
whoever wants to do that,
okay,
come to hour1.ai and you can create it on the platform.
For you, does this matter in audio? You think about this?
Absolutely. Characters are a big part of what we do. We're going to enable, first of all, gamers to really get into the role-playing of their character. For example, if someone wants to emulate their Fortnite character or their Overwatch character, they can just apply the proper voice skin, and then they will sound exactly like that character to all of their friends and all of the in-game people. So that's going to be something.
And on your point of concern, should we talk about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so for me, going back to, riffing off of what Aleissia said about, this relationship where there's one of servitude, right? Like that's where my point of concern comes in, because that's when you think about, okay, when you do have this relationship that is one where it's unequal and you're just like giving commands to a character, if that character is then visually represented as a person of color, what does that mean, right? Like we're just getting into really bad territory at that point. So I think unless what we're talking about, and what I'm in favor of, is AI characters who we consider as peers or friends. Like I'm totally on board with that kind of thing. But slapping a visual representation on like Alexa, for example, is where it's kind of really, really murky territory. And I think we really do need further research and to be really careful about that direction.
There was some work just yesterday. I saw some tweets. You may have seen it, a chart of different reactions that the different chatbot assistants give now, Alexa. And did you see this? If you tell it it's beautiful versus if you throw an insult at it. And the fact that most of them are styled as women, is particularly telling in those moments.
But it's scary, and to be honest, I'm an AI programmer, but most of the AI programmers I've worked with have, no offense, always been men. And I think it is scary right now that reaction of if this, then say that, is being programmed by a subset of the population is really scary. And this comes to almost on the ethics side. We really need to start thinking about who are putting in place the rule sets that we have, who's validating this, where are we going to start enforcing what we do? Is my microphone off? Yes. what we're going to do with all that. But coming back to kind of the human digital characters, there's actually a really great Facebook group. It's called Virtual Beings. There's going to be a conference, I think, later this year all around digital characters across the board. But as I was scrolling through it this morning to see the examples, every single article that was linked was around female digital character representations, all for modeling, for advertisement, for areas that I think is personally scary. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with us going around the route of making human versions, but I think we need to really think about the content of how we're using them. There are so many opportunities around education and different areas, advocacy, where we could be using these digital characters. But just as an example, while I was scrolling through news, it is all about, look at this digital character who is a model or who is representing this brand. And I think this is where we need to really think about the content that these characters are being used or how they're being represented.
Yeah, you have.
I think we see also a lot of same challenges for society with this option of creating content. Someone says something, you don't know if he actually said that. We don't know if it's real or fake. Obviously, there is a process where someone wants to create the content and another person donates his character in voice and face, but eventually, did it happen or not? Nobody actually sat in front of a camera in any point of time. And this is why we, from first day, decided to, whenever we create content with our platform, it will be marked as such and tracked as such. So nobody will be, able to say, I didn't know it was a computer-generated video content, and feel bad because of that.
We don't have those rules though yet today, and the amount of times I've heard people tell me about how their kids think that Alexa is kind of part of the family, and that they've yelled at their parents saying, like, don't talk to Alexa like that. Say thank you, say I'm sorry to Alexa. And kids are growing up where they think that Alexa's real, it's like a pet, it's part of the family. So I think it is something that we need to think about. How do we explain what is artificial versus what is real?
You can try, see how many times you say please to Alexa at home, asking very nicely. So it's happening all the time.
Well, unfortunately, according to this thing yesterday, you can say some really wretched things to Alexa, and she won't shun you or give you any negative feedback necessarily either. So, let's talk about that just for one moment, because that was one of the questions we had. But look, we can talk about this over lunch, but the pitfalls, the moral traps, the potential for danger is enormous. You mentioned diversity, which I actually also agree, substrate thing we must work on if we're going to get this right. What else can we do? And by the way, comment on that more as well, in order to kind of do this right, to introduce these technologies, which I also believe will allow for massive amounts of new forms of expression, ways to interact with information that may have great positive, effects on the world. But what can we do to get it right?
Definitely jumping on the diversity point. I think that's diversity of backgrounds, diversity of skill sets as well, right? So having people who are, as Aleissia said, we're both engineers, but people who are not just engineers as well. People who are writers, game designers, all kinds of folks. I think that is definitely one part of the solution. I think also just, who are we looking at as our audience as well, right? Just looking, so I'm really glad, I actually hadn't seen that study that was out yesterday, but I'm glad that those studies are happening. And I think we do need further research into things like what happens when we interact with a digital avatar who is represented as this race versus that race, right? Like, what are the different ways people interact, and like what are just collecting as much data as possible about the ways in which users interact with digital avatars.
Anybody else?
Yeah, AI characters really present all of us, with a tremendous opportunity to empower women and people of color across the world. And there's a lot to be done in this regard, and we're really looking forward to do this. And perhaps you can't really talk about artificial intelligence without talking about the largest AI character, the most visible one, our friend Elon, back in Fremont, California. As head of OpenAI, when he was a part of that, he was creating this kind of alarmist and very kind of woe is me and gloom and doom attitude that is kind of reminiscent of the whole climate change phenomenon. And it's true that it's more effective to really educate people about the pitfalls and the potential dangers of AI by using a more informative type of education instead of something that's totally alarmist.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'd say kind of very different to what you're both talking about, but we need to think about how do we make this technology more accessible to people? Because the reality is, unless you live in Silicon Valley, New York, or a subset of cities in the world, the idea of, I want to make my own digital character is like, good luck with that.
Not what most people waking up thinking about.
Yeah, so I think all of us who are working in this field need to think about making these platforms, making tools, making all of these elements so that the technology can be much more accessible. Like, I would love to make a version of this in the coming years that if I think of Scratch, which is a program for kids to be able to create video games, imagine having a really simplistic tools with all the building blocks there for kids in schools to start thinking about making their own digital characters, learn about this, learn what the possibility space is, but really around making the technology accessible so that we don't 5 or 10 years from now think back and go, yeah, it really was a subset of people who were very privileged who got to kind of dictate where the future of AI was going.
I think one of the things that needs to be handled, and I talked about it a minute ago, it was to recognize that the content is synthetic. And because we are generating a lot of synthetic content, because we have a lot of, a big database of characters, we are working actually with the universities to enable them the approach to the data. And based on that data, they will be able to, create tools probably coming again from the artificial intelligence side to recognize and label such kind of videos. So you have the characters. First thing is to understand that this is a fictional character or a synthetic character, and I think we will help society to do that.
Well, all these issues of data provenance. Is Shweta still here? Shweta Jain, is she still in the room? She was here earlier from a startup that we worked with called eWitness. It was working on provenance of content. That stuff's going to get much more important, as is all of the issues around how we hold platforms to account when they do post this content, that kind of thing. We're about to go to lunch, so I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then I'm going to ask maybe our panelists, if they will, maybe stick around up here and maybe answer any questions the audience might have as folks get their sandwich. But let's go to this lady here first, and then we'll come here as well. Yes?
This is just more of a thought experiment, I guess. It was conjuring up in my mind a few different things related to this from the dark side of its capabilities. So I was thinking about phishing related to cybersecurity. I was thinking about this dear 89-year-old friend of mine who years ago, her and her husband got a call from who they thought was their grandson, professing to be horribly in trouble, and ended up getting money wired to this guy who wasn't their grandson. And it made me think about the dark side of this, that somebody would be able to, let's say, talk to someone and get their voice down and use it in these kinds of ways where you would be pretending you were somebody else with a voice, a character, using it for all these kinds of pulling out money or pulling out information. Sure. So I was thinking about that, and if you could speak to that, because that's a whole other...
That seems like it's straight for Terry, the imposter phenomenon. What
Absolutely.
can we do?
Yeah, Justin, like you were saying, we have to be very conscientious in building ethical safeguards into our technology. As you say, people who are using the technology for nefarious reasons will definitely attempt to find a way. And so that's why we build these ethical safeguards straight into not only our neural networks, but also the audio stream. So we allow anyone who wants to check if audio is synthesized to check it with our watermarking system to really demonstrate whether or not that it came from Modulate or not. So that's one of the many steps we're taking to ensure that this technology is used only as a creative tool.
It may not help the 89-year-old who may not know how to do that, but there may be some other mechanism that gets built in ultimately. I think the thing is, this ends up being like a systems problem, right? Like, how am I?
What is the source?
Yeah.
What is the source of the data? Where it is coming from? That's the main question. And I think people will build tools to, first of all, recognize the source. So,
cool. Let's go here, and then we'll come to you, and then yes, yeah, real quick.
Thank you. I'm asking from the animated film world, where all the characters are synthetic, and we've seen a lot of progress over time in AI-generated behavioral characters. Because the cost of producing an animated character is so high, it's obviously a really big win, but the problem has always been the same in the past, and that is that although a lot of times it's great to have the character to do some like arbitrary behavior that's based on intelligence, some of the time you need to do it something very specific. It's directability. And when it switches to that directability mode, it's not seamless. And you need it to be seamless, because if not, the emotional connection's broken and the utility's kind of lost. So has there been any progress in smoothing over those boundaries between the AI-generated behaviors and the directable ones, which are necessary for it to,
So this is a really good question, and one that applies not just in entertainment, animation, but also in other applications, customer service, any other one where we might want to use an AI character and then transition it to a real human or to an operator or something along those lines. Anybody got any thoughts on that, on the that moment of transition?
Without diving into the technical stack of all of this, but I feel like it is something we've been doing, at least on the video game side, for many years, and it's about kind of stacking up a priority system of what it is that you are doing. So yes, maybe I'm in the process of doing something because I was out and I saw a thing and it's not directed, but I was like, ooh, exciting. But then the system says, right now, I need you to do this. I do feel that kind of queuing priority system does exist, the transitions, the smoothing, the how do I change my facial, how do I start changing where my body is showing okay, my focus is changing towards this other thing. I feel like it kind of is somewhat of a solved problem. I think the issue is when it's, I want to start doing this right now, which I know in the past, coming from an AI perspective and working with designers, it was, why? Is it because, what's the purpose of stopping in this instant versus stopping a second or two from now, which will make it look more seamless. But I also think procedural animation is something that's really been helping on that front as well. I know Ubisoft did a bunch of technology with motion matching that has been able to help them to go from these smooth transitions and animations. Sorry, I don't want to go down the animation AI tech rabbit hole, but I do feel like there have been already a lot of progress in that field.
And this
in
stuff
the
is
last
very
5
much
years.
important, very much more important in
Yeah,
AR,
I mean,
VR.
for mixed reality, this is
Yeah.
huge, right? Because you're working in the real world. You cannot design around knowing what the real world is going to be and what's going to be happening. So everything needs to be where anything can change at any moment.
Environmental.
So I think a combination of stack priority AI systems and procedural animation is helping quite a bit on that front. But we could talk more if you want. I'd love to get your point.
Let's please do.
Let's take one more question, just really quickly. Yeah.
So my question is, you're talking a lot about data privacy and watermarking and stuff like that. What role do you see blockchain playing in the AI world as far as keeping things private goes, to be able to track the exact location of where something was created to avoid fakes?
Is blockchain going to solve it all? All those worries?
Certainly not going to solve it all.
No,
but
you know what I mean.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
So blockchain might have some potential use cases with the cryptographic hashes that it offers, and also the persistent decentralized ledger system that it can provide. So perhaps it could be used for some sort of secure authentication when, for example, you're using Oren's technology and you want to make sure that your video is fully authenticated and that maybe you only have access to it. And then when it comes to voice skins, perhaps it could be used to really just authenticate that you have ownership of it. And then in terms of gaming, I believe it's being used for all types of transactions. Yep.
I think blockchain will help basically solve the problem of the source of the video or the audio. So whenever you will create that video immediately on blockchain technologies, you can track the source if you do it in the right way.
Still some computational challenges there to roll that stuff out.
Additionally, if a company doesn't want to look for funding from a VC, perhaps they could try an ICO, get a coin offering.
Okay. Any last thoughts? Anything you want to leave this audience with? Any of you? Okay, I'm hoping you'll stick around just a moment and let this group ask you some questions. Some of you are going to wonder and want to get some lunch, which it's time for. We're going to try to start back right on time at 1:30. So go enjoy your lunch. Please talk to one another. Come and talk to these panelists, but let's thank them before you go. Thank you.